We are here with Brother Richard A. Rowe. Brother has found a knowledge into how to engage in health in the Black community. Is working with the Mental Health Alliance and several organizations. This brother is phenomenal in the context of how to do the work. I am Dr. Kevin Washington, Wataka Sankara, and we are here to have a profound conversation. This discussion is about empowering the spirit, mental wellness, and the community support. Brother, welcome to the conversation. With you today.
Glad to be with you, my good brother. Glad to be with you always. And I know I'm in the right place if you are in that space. So it is an honor and a pleasure to be with you again. I have enjoyed, being with you on a number of occasions. I have worked with you. I have listened to you. I have sat at your feet to really learn and to grow and to be inspired and to move our community in the right direction. So I'm always glad to be in your space. It is always a brave and safe place and space. So I'm glad to be here and welcome to you, my brother.
Thank you so much. It's in the spirit of Ubuntu. How about this one? I am because you are. I am because you exist. The work that you've been doing in Baltimore and around this space. Empowering the spirit, mental wellness, and community support. Brother Rowe, we have a situation happening within our community where there seems to be some level of imbalance. Some talk about even the idea of chaos and the impact of such. What are some words that you can share about societal chaos in this context of where we find ourselves and mental wellness?
Mm-hmm. And I know we will basically, go back and forth and have this exchange, because again, you and I have basically covered some of these critical topics, and societal chaos can be easily seen all around us. We are basically responding to chaos in a society that basically prioritizes, the individual over the community. It prioritizes conspicuous consumption, prioritizes, inequities, injustices, prioritizes violence, over healing. And so we are surrounded by all of those external forces daily, weekly, every single day. And social media contributes to the inability for us to really resolve and to center ourselves as a people, on those things that are critical and that are most important to us in our survival. And so, we could offer and lift up statistics in terms of how we are faring. There's a book, Brother Inwata, by called Brainwash. And the book basically, Brother Thomas, I think it's Thomas Burrell, concludes that we are generally at the top of every bad list and at the bottom of every good list, statistically, be it economics, be it financial, be it psychological, be it health, be it, community, poverty, anything that basically has to do with our overall human development as a people. We are generally at the top of those bad lists and at the bottom of every good list. And that's then and now. Now, given, we have to at least acknowledge the fact that we are a people, again, kidnapped from our motherland and basically brought to other places, dropped off at different places. Our Ma'afa, which is to some called theirs Holocaust, but our Ma'afa stripped us of our humanity, forced us to do things that we would not have done had we not been kidnapped and basically forced to, to basically languish on plantations in spaces and places that were not healthy, that robbed us of our essence. So I say all that to simply say that the chaos has been with us for a long time. Chaos today in society today means that we are basically trying to respond to different phenomenons, or I guess I would call them systems, white supremacy systems, of deprivation, systems of dehumanization, systems of criminalization. Those systems have basically created chaos. And the goal, I would hope and think that, this conversation will help us center ourselves on what is critical and important for us to respond in a manner that will bring us into a mental space, into a spiritual space, into a physical space that would provide optimal mental health and well-being, that will basically allow us to really return to our center and move our community and our people in the right direction. So that's what I'm hoping for, and that would be my response to that question that you just raised.
And it's powerful because what you started off with were the pillars to me of that which is antithetical to humanity. You mentioned the individualism, you mentioned the consumerism, you mentioned all of those things that are antithetical to what it means to be human within, you said, our context. And you talked about this idea of centralizing ourselves or becoming centered in who we are. And then you talked about the issue of the Ma'afa, M-A-A-F-A, the great suffering of African people at the hands of Europeans and Arabs. Is a construct that was advanced by both Dr. Asa Hilliard and Dr. Marimba Ani around this idea of how do we describe our phenomena. Let's go to this issue of what does it mean to be antithetical to humanity? Because for some people, the idea of what it means to be human is to be communal. And communal means that we're taking care of one another. Community means that we're loving one another, we're supporting one another. Community means the idea of come together, unity, joining in the context of bettering everyone, that if I survive, we survive. If I eat, we eat. Or if we eat, everybody is good. And that the experiment was done. You familiar with the experiment where the scientists brought the candy or whatever the things were to the children, but only a few could get the children and get the candy in Africa. And so what happened is that nobody ate from the bag. Nobody ate anything, and the white scientist was confused. And the idea is that they said that if all of us can't get any of it, none of us can get any of it. Right. That's a construct that says that we are important. So we're going to get to that idea of we. But you mentioned this notion of humanity, and I want to say that this is antithetical to humanity. So are you suggesting to us that we're living in a space that's antithetical to what it means to be human within the context of African people who were stolen via the Ma'afa?
I would definitely conclude that yes, we are, living. A lot of us. We can't overgeneralize, but again, when we are not taking care of one another, when families are being destabilized, when our spiritual center has been compromised, when we are not clear about what our spiritual center is anymore, what our healing center, where we are from a healing standpoint, all these things are antithetical to becoming human. And where that was not a kind of antithetical notion or thought, it has become more and more a kind of a challenge for us to really, really figure that out now. And so, we are going at each other, not lifting up each other. We are denigrating and demeaning ourselves in ways that we would never have even conceived. And so here we are, Brother Washington, Brother Nwata, in 2024, engage in all kinds of antithetical, behaviors to our that speaks to our humanity. If we only knew. I said something to myself earlier today. I said, we used to know the way. Mm-hmm. We used to know the way, but because we've forgotten the way, we have lost our way and now following the ways of our oppressor. Think about that, brother. We used to know the way, and the way is Ubuntu. I am because we are. We are because I am. That is a psychological, philosophical, cosmological, ontological, all the things that, brother, I know you can lift up. Those were the way we saw the world. We lived in the world. We responded to the world, and now we are responding to their way, and are now attacking each other. Uh, it, Not really connecting with each other, basically missing in action when it comes to our young people. They are in need of our guidance, our instructions, our support, and so forth. And we basically sometimes engage in otherizing them, or basically
Mm.
ignoring their needs and so forth, otherizing each other. And so
Other
that
right.
those are no longer, I mean, those are antithetical to our humanity, our historical humanity, and our the way we operated in the past, and how we operated, not in such so far a distance past. On the continent, yes, we had basically structures and norms and values that we honored, and that were institutionalized. And so we've got to somehow manage to get back to the institutionalization of those things that basically maximized our humanity.
Mm. How do we, because this word that you use quite often is center ourselves. How do we, or what can we do to deal with this reality that we find ourselves in? And how does the of centering ourselves fit into that actions agenda that we must take?
It has to be intentional, and has to be deliberate, and we have to decide, Brother Washington, if we're up to the challenge of really re-Africanizing, or if we
Mm.
are up to the challenge of reintroducing ourselves to those norms, those structures, those ceremonies, those values,
Mm.
rather, that are critical for our development. And so it starts early, in our homes first, in ourselves. I mean, we have to decide if we understand who we are.
Mm.
We are still, Brother Washington, the only tribe. I'll call, for lack of, another word, ethnic group, or what have you. But we are a tribe that is still struggling with a three-worded question: Who am I? Or who
Mm.
are we? In 2024,
Mm.
we're struggling. Are we Black? Are we colored? Are we Negro? Are we Afro? Are we African American? Are we Moorish American? Are we Israelites? I mean, we are still struggling,
Mm.
my good brother, with the identity question: Who am I?
Oh.
And as we both know, if you basically move too far away from your identity, which is provided to you by a commitment to understanding and appreciating culture, your culture. Culture gives us three things, right? Identity, purpose, and direction. And if your culture has been compromised, if you are not clear about your cultural constructs, your cultural assets, if you are basically not clear about what they are, then you will be confused with your identity, and
Mm.
you will be unable to really then figure out what direction should we go in, what our purpose in. Your identity will provide you with purpose, and if you're not clear about your purpose, then it's going to be very hard to really figure out the direction that you should go in. So yes, we've got to basically center ourselves through a number of things, figure out what our sacred institution, the home, must become, what it should look like, what it should contain, what is the regimen in our homes daily? Are we basically practicing a daily regimen? And I'm certain that you can add to this kind of regimen that should be part and parcel of our 24-hour day time frame. What should we be doing when we wake up? What should we be doing between waking up and going to sleep at night? Affirmations, proverbs, basically figuring out what those cultural assets are, and artifacts, I should call them artifacts, that we must basically commit ourselves to understanding, appreciating, honoring, and celebrating. That the home is the place where we begin, but then we basically move out of the home. I'm not going to go far off on a tangent in terms of the other components that are critical, but if we started there, that would be a critical place. If we basically figured out too, my brother, what are those things that we must replace social media, TV, and all the distractions with? Are they the affirmations? Are they the books? Are they the films, the movies, the music, the ceremonies, Kwanzaa celebrations? All those different artifacts are critical if we're going to recenter ourselves, if we're going to be Africanized, and you can basically share another word. If we're going to lift up and honor Ubuntu philosophy, critical philosophy. I love the story you shared with the anthropologist again, who basically thought the children were going to run separately to the tree to get all the candy for themselves. They didn't do that. They ran together. They wouldn't eat until we all could eat. Until they all could eat. And that's where we got to get back to, brother. So I'll stop there.
No, that is, I mean, you're moving, right? When you mentioned this idea of knowing who you are, what came to mind was the Lion King and James Earl Jones's voice when he said, know who you are, right? And that is so important. And Frantz Fanon says that we each person must ask this question: who am I? Am I who I say I am? And am I all I ought to be? Who am I? Am I who I say I am? Am I all I ought to be? And so Frantz Fanon, profound mental health specialist, talking about how to deal with Black mental health. And so you are hitting some critical points, and you allude to quite often, of course, the work around Ubuntu. Ubuntu, U means being in Zulu. Into you is unifying life force. And so it is a being with a unifying life force, which means there's something that runs through everything. And because of that same thing being connected, then I must honor it at all times. And you said that we are disconnected. I am reminded of some research that I came across when I was in South Africa. I think I shared this narrative with you, but we were asking the question about gangs in South Africa, and this researcher said that, well, the gangs don't exist among the Zulu, among the Ndebele, the Swana, the Xhosa, and we asked the question why. They said because what happens is that they may try to imitate Western culture for a moment, but we pull them aside and we tell them, remember you're Zulu, remember you're Ndebele, remember you're right? And then they take them to the bush and they do this rites of passage piece. So you were talking about ritual, and I thought that was a powerful piece. You mentioned about family and ritual, and we can actually explore that. And also, what do youth need to do, right? It seems like this idea of ritual is also tied to how we raise our youth. Right now, rites of passage seems to be tied to, as you were alluding to, social media, and how do we communicate in that in that domain? How many likes do we have? How many follows do we have? And so it's that what's the emotional touch point that I can find, I can get. And so it seems like the media, social media, is a part of our rites of passage. But you're saying that we need to take more control of that, right? And put the pillars in place. So that seems to be something to do. What do you think about the idea of rites of passage, passage programs and processes to facilitate parenting, adulting, and so forth?
Definitely, we need structures and ceremonies, and we need to really have, again, I don't want to necessarily call them just programs, but they have to become, part and parcel of our being, of our essence as a people. How do we really, resist the onslaught of the forces from without that contribute to the disconnection, contribute to the demonization, that the meaning of ourselves and the denigration of ourselves? What contributes to all of that? And social media plays a role. We, you and I know, Brother Nwata, that the institutions that used to really basically influence us the most were home, school, church. At some point in our cycle, in our sojourn here, after being kidnapped, those became essential institutions that really contribute to our development as a people. Home was essential and still is, and they influence us versus TV, peer group, and television. So those are now the influential institutions that basically have captured the minds of our young people. And so unless we have something that operates 24/7, in the same way that social media has captured the imagination and the attention of our young people, they are on social media platforms. Some research studies conclude between 7 to 9 hours a day. And that is a long time to be basically decentered from your center, or to be basically preoccupied with those things that are not, critical for your development as a people. So rites of passage at least provides some way to help with all the things that we've discussed up to this point. It basically introduces the essence and the critical connection of being tied to your culture. It basically focuses attention on identity, purpose, and direction. It definitely honors the ancestors. It teaches you who the ancestors are. It is basically historically based. So it basically also provides you with a greater sense of your history. And as Dr. Chancellor Williams said in his great book, The Destruction of Black Civilization, the people who lost their history lost their lives. So he quotes, the people, what happened to the people of Sumner? They forgot their history, they lost their history, and they didn't survive or thrive. And so we've got to basically reintroduce especially for our young people, a greater understanding and appreciation of our history. Again, I will lift up the importance of those cultural artifacts and assets that allow us to really endure, to thrive, to prosper in spite of the forces from without, that allowed us to really connect to one another. It taught us what manhood was about, what womanhood was about. So it was a process. And there has to be a process for becoming human. There has to be a process for becoming men, women, under this Black African, the African Black way, or the Black African way. However we describe it, there has to be a way to really educate and inform us what those processes are. How do you basically respond to your environment? What is the spiritual aspect of all of this that you understand and really appreciate the spiritual essence of yourself, your ontology, your cosmology, your epistemology, all those things, basically are ingrained and incorporated in a rights program. And so what to celebrate, what to be influenced by, what to illuminate, what to not basically succumb to. And rites of passage initiatives are designed to do just that, to really keep you focused, keep you centered, and keep you moving in the right direction, despite all the distractions that will try to capture and to move you in the direction that is in service of your oppressor. I will lift up this powerful title of a book, brother, that I read by Dr. Amos Wilson.
I hear where you're going, Amos Wilson. I hear it.
Called Black on Black Violence, right?
Yeah.
And the subtitle to that powerful book, Brother Washington, is, the dynamics, Black on Black Violence, the dynamics of psychodynamics of self-annihilation in service of white domination. If I'm misquoting my brother, you share that with the psychodynamics.
No, you hit it.
Annihilation or group annihilation in service of white domination. So all that to say, we have to really find our way back to those kinds of powerful notions and thoughts and ideas about who we are and about what we need to do. And I would simply say we have all of that at our disposal and all of that around us. We just simply have to help our young people and ourselves refocus ourselves and refocus our efforts to really lift up and honor, those critical aspects of being human and being a people.
I'm saying all of us, because there's so many adults that would say I ain't no African. You mentioned re-Africanization several times, right? I haven't lost anything in Africa. It's like, well, maybe that's where we lost a lot of things. So we have to be able to have that conversation, and also hitting on this idea of social constructs of how we move forward. And you mentioned axiology, that is the nature of values, epistemology, the nature of knowledge that a culture has. And these are the basic foundations of any worldview: epistemology, knowledge, ontology, the God concept, right? That one operates from, uh, which one is it? Ontology, actual epistemology, and cosmology. The
Cosmology.
nature of the universe, right? So how the universe is organized, and so this is important to know that every group has the worldview, and that's what you say. You're saying is part of our healing and restoration, the sensory process. Who are this we that you alluding to quite often? And who's this we?
The we would consist of those of us who basically are at a point where we are no longer searching for for a self for a self that is external to ourselves. So again, it would basically, again, we can't be someone else and ourselves at the same time. So we're going to have to really try to figure out, from this notion of we would be our, those of us who could relate to our Holocaust or our Ma'afa, let me say that, our Ma'afa, who basically have, a kind of understanding, appreciation, of the things that you just lifted up, our cosmology, our ontology, our worldview, who can basically respect a worldview that includes people of the historically from the continent who basically were kidnapped and because again, we cannot basically continue to quibble over, I'm this, I'm a Muslim, or I'm this kind of person. I mean, we got to basically decide, Brother Washington, that we are either going to confuse ourselves even more by trying to be someone else that we're not, or we're going to simply agree that, those of us who have this understanding of our African selves, and that we are basically a people who have certain customs and values and norms that we can agree to, that would constitute for me getting closer to this notion of the we. And we have to basically, make some decisions. Everybody's not going to, as you indicated just a few minutes ago, I'm not African. There will be those, I'm not Black. I'm part of another group. I'm Episcopalian, I'm Pentecostal, I'm something else. So again, that we is going to be a challenge for us too, because of Dr. Carter G. Woodson's notion of the miseducation. And so it's going to be a point in time that we're simply going to have to agree that here's the definition of the we. Do you fit in that definition? Can you support this definition, this idea of a people who experience a certain kind, who has a similar kind of experience, and who have now decided that they want to really be together and come together and make an agreement that we're going to build together in order to advance our community and lift up our community.
Something that I think is critical you've been hitting on, and we should lock it in on this one and look at some practices, right? We talked about rite of passage practice. You mentioned certain things that we can do. How do we rise in the morning, right? How do we connect as family, as community that make for the we? How do we move throughout the day? As you mentioned, affirmations and rituals and those kind of things. Those things are very, very important. People probably want to know what are some practical things that I can do every single day. I will throw this out as you come up with the some of those things that we can do. Some more things as we look at action steps. Every time people utilize a U.S. dollar, it has a European ancestor on it. That is a kind of a ritual that says that in order to get the thing that I desire, I have to thank this particular ancestor, which is not my ancestor, by the way, for making it possible for this to happen. And so these are subtle rituals that are happening every single day that people have no idea that they're ritualizing the power and the prowess of people who have oppressed them. What are some of the rituals, right, that we can do? Rising in the morning, men cleaning and clarifying the space that they live in, rising and moving in prayer. But what are some things that you think, rites of passage, other things that we can do, some practical steps that we can do to engage in daily, you mentioned celebrations of Kwanzaa, of daily activities of community growth and development that will facilitate us being more firm in the we?
I think, and there's a long list, of course, of those kinds of activities that we can basically embrace and practice on a daily basis. But I think, it's the waking up and to a meditation, waking up with meditation, waking up with definition. We sometimes, are confused. Chaos is caused by confusing, again, who we are and what our purpose on this earth should be about. I think, brother, that when we wake up in the morning, we should basically, we can do it either way that we choose, but we have to be clear about what is causing us to really be who we are and who we are not. If we are going to think clearly about this notion of white supremacy, what has that done to us? We have to understand, as Nellie Fuller has taught us, in so many ways, if you don't understand what it is and how it works, then everything else that you understand will only confuse you. So we've got to be clear about the definition of white supremacy, because that has basically captured our imagination and has caused us to really remain in a chaotic state, because we're not clear that there's a system out there that prevents us from centering ourselves. So that's part of the daily regimen, understanding clearly and acknowledging what happened to us. Not what's wrong with us, but what happened to us. So that can be done through meditation. That can be done by sitting still, being quiet and reflecting, engaging in serious introspection, with lifting up, certain affirmations about being human, being successful, being happy, being clean, being clear. Those are the kinds of thoughts that should pass through our minds in the beginning of each day. And then as we go about our days, our regimen should include reading. Our regimen should include, knowing exactly what to eat, when to eat. It should also include exercise. It should also include listening to music. It should also include, in my estimation, having a time that we devote to understanding again our cultural artifacts. And so that means, what are they? Are they, artwork? Are they music? Is it, certain kind of daily, process of simply, making certain that we're taking care of ourselves. So, it's definitely connecting with each other in our homes, connecting with each other outside of our homes. It's healing circles. It's, basically knowing again, where to go to get information, the right information. So it's a combination of a lot of different things that we need to really incorporate into our daily lives. I also would simply, include a better appreciation for our faith, our spiritual selves, and that can be done, within our religious institutions, those that basically have a liberatory kind of framework. It can't not be just, left up to folks who may look like us but may not understand, our African self, our Black African selves, and so that has to be part and parcel of the selection of the things that we end up, taking on. Also, it has to include, I would suggest that it will also include, you know, um, thinking about our future, thinking not just about the immediate, but thinking about our future. So what is the plan that we are going to give serious thought to as we figure out how do we get to the next stage, get to the next step? So all these things have to be part of the regimen. May not be in the order that some folks can appreciate, but I'm simply sharing and listing some of those things that should be included as we try to really move ourselves from one stage of our development to a higher stage of our development. And so those would be some of the things that I would offer up as activities. And then of course there are many, many more. But self-care, radical self-care, I would conclude by simply saying, we know that for the work that we're all doing, some of us are doing, that if we're not taking care of ourselves, if we're not putting on our oxygen mask, which means, again, diet, sleep, rest, relaxation, stepping back, turning off media, turning off social media, and replacing it with the things that I mentioned earlier, with music, with affirmations, with proverbs, African proverbs, and so forth and so on. Those are the kinds of things that we've got to basically practice on a consistent basis.
Thank you so much. This segment has focused on challenging the dynamics of chaos. Brother Rowe has mentioned moving through chaos through self-knowledge. He simply said that if you want to move forward, you must know who you are. Knowing who you are comes through the activities that you engage in. He mentioned ritual or activities or practices of how we meditate in the morning, connecting, how do we eat, how do we exercise, how do we cleanse and purify the body. As Rose mentioned to us, that the basis of all knowledge we know is self-knowledge. That when you know who you are, you engage in practices that actually reaffirm your being in the world. And you can elevate the construct of Ubuntu, which means that your humanity is tied to my humanity, that we can only be human together. That everything you do impacts me in my space, but everything that I do impacts you in your space. There must be accountable and responsible for what I do because it is about the we. Thank you so much for this particular segment. And we're going to have to slide into another conversation about what happens to us when we engage in some self-destructive behaviors. Bro, we're on our way to that section right now.